Welcome to Mastering the Art of Success. I'm your host, Debbi DiMaggio. We are here today with Michael Romer. He is coming to us live from New York City.
Hi, Debbie. How
Well,
are you? Thanks for having me.
I'm great. Thank you for coming. I'm so excited. I just got back from New York a couple days ago. We had an amazing time in your city. It's just, and especially in fall. We started to go in October because it's so beautiful there.
It's a beautiful time of year here. Not today, but generally speaking, yeah.
I know. I'm in California on the West Coast, and I usually have a view of the San Francisco Bay, and it's socked in today too. So I guess it's just what it is. All right, we are going to do your slideshow, present your slideshow, and I'm going to properly introduce you. Michael Romer is the co-founder and managing partner of Romer Debbas LLP, the largest residential real estate law practice in New York City, and co-founder of Real Estate Center for Success. He advises international investors, financial institutions, co-op, condo boards, and private equity clients on acquisitions, financing, development, and litigation. Recognized by super lawyers and frequent media contributor, Michael brings both legal expertise and entrepreneurial insight from building one of New York City's most active real estate firms. Michael represents a broad range of clients in connection with the acquisition, sale, lease, development, and or financing of commercial and residential properties. Such clients include both domestic and foreign individuals buying for residential or investment purposes, as well as institutional and private equity clients. In addition, Michael has a long history of representing prominent financial institutions in commercial and residential lending transactions, including some of the most exclusive private banks and wealth management divisions in the country. He also represents many cooperative and condominium boards in New York City area, handling their general counsel and litigation needs. Michael and co-founder Pierre Davis had a vision to create a full-service firm that could handle any and all real estate-related matters, including acquisition, sale, leasing, co-op, condo board representation, development, as well as related areas such as corporate, real estate litigation, estate planning, and immigration. Providing the best advice in a cost-effective manner is a core principle of the firm. In 2018, Michael was named Super Lawyers New York Metro Real Estate, which lists the top 5% of all lawyers in respective areas as nominated by their peers. Prior to that, Michael was regularly named in the Rising Stars section of Super Lawyers, which lists the top 2.5% of lawyers under the age of 40. Michael is a frequent contributor to national and local media outlets with respect to issues related to real estate and related finance. He regularly presents lectures, and serves on panel discussions in front of a wide range of audiences, including many of the top brokerage houses in New York City. Michael is certified by New York Department of State to reach continuing education courses to residential real estate agents and commercial brokers. All right, Michael, that is a lot. I don't know how you get through a day, a week, a month, a year. How many lawyers do you have in your firm?
So at this point, we have 29 lawyers in the firm. So we've grown it from our firm of two attorneys back in 2011 to 29 here in 2025, and that's a testament to New York real estate. The support that we receive from the community here has been just it's been heartwarming, and we love what we do, and we're not stopping anytime soon.
Wow. I mean, that's just amazing. So I was just in New York speaking, introducing my new book, The Mindset and Motion Method, to our agents with Corcoran Group on the Upper East Side. Have you spoken with the Corcoran agents at any time?
Oh, oh, sure, we know them very well, and congratulations on your book, by the way. It's very exciting.
Thank you.
And
Thank you.
the world of real estate is never boring, and the stories that you all on the brokerage side have, it the average person doesn't fully understand the amount of work that goes into matching a person with their home. And it could be you're showing them two apartments or houses or 200, and there's a lot of work that goes into it. So i I
Yeah.
for one appreciate
Oh, it's crazy, but it's fun. It does. It makes for an interesting story. It never, no 2 days or no two deals are exactly alike, as you know, because you're fully immersed. Well, first, before we go through all the questions, let's go back to where were you raised?
it.
Tell us your journey to where you are today. And when you were younger, did you think this is where you would be today?
All great questions. I turned 50 in the last year. And so I've been thinking back a lot, how I started, where I grew up. So it's really interesting, and then the timing is perfect on this. So I actually grew up in Staten Island, New York. People across the country have probably never heard of it. It's the least known borough of New York City, but I loved it. My dad was a New York City cop, worked in Manhattan for a long time, became a detective, raised myself and my three brothers on Staten Island, and it was just a great upbringing. Loved it. And, from my standpoint, I knew I wanted to go to college and I knew I wanted to do something more. I didn't know what that was. So at first I thought maybe I'd get a master's, go down the business route. And then I said, you know what, let me try law school. So I went to St. John's Law School in Queens, great school, had a great time there. And I wanted to start figuring out what type of law I wanted to practice. So first I wanted to be Jerry Maguire. I wanted to be a sports and entertainment lawyer. I thought that would be great. I love sports, but then I realized there's not enough jobs. Then I thought I was going to stay in the family business and become a prosecutor. And I spent a summer in one of the DA's offices here in New York, realizing this is not what I wanted to do at all. And then I tried litigation and realized that's not my personality. And I found transactional real estate, which has been my home for the last 25 years, and residential, commercial, whatever the case may be. I found a home in deal making, and that's where I can combine business and law and have a little fun at the same time.
I love it. You sound like me. I didn't know what I wanted to do, and you kind of stumbled here and there, and then all of a sudden you
It finds
found
you.
it.
Yeah.
It does. I always like to just remind, especially the younger people who are trying to figure it out now. You just start, and the book kind of talks about that. Just you have to get into momentum and try things, and you never know what path you're going to end up on. So I love your story for that. So let's go right into the meat of it. What are some of the most complex or interesting transactions you've worked on, and what made them stand out?
Oh my goodness. The first thing that I'll tell you is we handle a lot of transactions. So we handle more residential transactions in New York City and maybe even the country than any law firm. So it's a high volume luxury residential practice. We also handle commercial transactions, but we're most well known in the high end luxury residential space. And the deals that are oftentimes the most complicated, believe it or not, are the friends and family transactions. And
Oh,
because now all of a sudden you're trying to help out that family member, you're trying to do them a favor, and family and friends, they don't understand the lines. It's a lot easier when you're representing a client, it's a business transaction, but when you're representing family, it makes things so much more complicated. But that's probably the best example I can give you in terms of complications just at a personal level. On the business side of things, when you're talking about types of properties here in New York, most
right.
apartments are either co-ops or condominiums, and then we have townhouse transactions. I would say the townhouse transactions are oftentimes the more complicated because there's so many nuances to these properties that have been around for 100 years. Each one has their own story. We have to look up the certificate of occupancy to make sure that the property is legal. Have to look up the zoning restrictions. I did one recently where there was an actual live running stream under the property here in New York. So you're researching how to make that happen. So these deals, they can be fun, but it involves a lot of work. And across the country, it's not always common for a lawyer to be involved in a residential transaction, right? So California, escrow states, but here in New York, and God bless New York, every party to the transaction has a lawyer, the buyer, the seller, the bank. And it's because of all the nuances involved, and each party needs to have that legal representation. But the most difficult ones are the ones that have more hair, tenants in the property. You need to have maybe there's violations or things that are wrong with the property. But the biggest challenge, and I know you know this on the selling side, is convincing a seller that the property might not be worth what they think it is.
And so, okay, so let's go there. So you're in escrow. Well, do you call it escrow there?
No,
Or,
yeah,
or
we
you,
in New York, escrow is a curse word. We want to have closings where we all show up and money is exchanged and a deed is handed over and we close. So there's this immediate exchange that happens in New York. So,
so what is it called so in New York, why don't
hmm,
you outline it? So in New York, well, here in California, we go into escrow when we ratify a deal. Clients calling right now, hopefully to ratify a deal with us, but I had to
love it.
click them off. But so the agent writes an offer. You walk us through it. The agent writes an offer, or I guess he writes an offer, and then the seller will accept it at some point. But walk us through the deal of how a deal is transacted and into through to the end.
Yeah,
So
I'm
who
happy
don't,
to. And it varies from state to state, but the bulk of our business is here in New York and New York City. So the process is relatively straightforward, where a buyer submits an offer. The seller then decides to accept the offer. At that point, the agents for both sides will circulate a deal sheet, a term sheet, summarizing all of the terms of the accepted offer, the price, whether it's a cash deal, whether it's involving financing, whether it's contingent on financing or not, which is oftentimes a big question, what's included in the property in terms of fixtures, personal property, and all of that is in one piece of paper that gets circulated to the lawyer for the buyer and the lawyer for the seller. The lawyer for the seller then prepares a draft contract of sale, submits it to the buyer's lawyer, and we start negotiating the contract. But while that's happening, one thing that's really different in New York is that we, as buyer's attorneys, have to do something called due diligence. We have to do our homework on the property, whether it's a co op, a condo, townhouse, but focusing on the co ops and condos, the apartments. We actually have to dig into these buildings, believe it or not, read the financial statements for these buildings for the last 3 years, take a look at the offering plans, the rules, regulations, bylaws. We actually send somebody to the property manager's office to read the board minutes just to see what's going on in the building. Because it's really our job to make sure that our buyers aren't buying a mistake. And so they're not buying anything that maybe they'll be unhappy with, or maybe they'll be surprises financially. It's our job to make sure that they're fully informed before they sign that contract. So with my office, Romer Debbas here in New York, they actually get a written due diligence summary from us, explaining to them in layman's terms all the risks associated with the transaction in the building, and we walk them through it, and then we let the buyer decide whether or not they want to proceed. And then if they elect to proceed, they will sign the contract, put 10% down, which is held by the seller's lawyer. The seller then would sign the contract. Then we have a deal. But you think we're done, but we're not.
that that's all done before you go into contract? You do all the due
So that
diligence?
all of that we talked about is done before the contract's even signed. So, and then once the contract's signed and that 10% is posted, down payment. So now all of a sudden, where do we go from here? So if it's a co-op or a condominium building, we need the co-op board or the condominium board to approve the transaction. So we have this board of homeowners or unit owners in the building that effectively get to decide whether or not this deal is going forward. Now, in a condo transaction, it's pretty straightforward because the condo has two choices: approve the transaction or buy the unit themselves. And they rarely, if ever, buy the unit themselves. In a co op, this is where it gets tricky. And 70% of the apartments in New York City are co ops. In a co op, a cooperative, for those of you who don't know, it's more along the lines of shares of stock in a corporation, but it's treated as real estate. But that board gets to decide whether you as a buyer are a good fit for their building, and they could elect to turn you down, and they don't have to tell you why. So that's one thing that's very different here in New York City.
Well, I mean, that just, I'm coming from California. That just rings discrimination and HUD violations. I don't, how can they do that legally?
Well, there've been a lot of challenges to this over the course of time, but I want you to picture that, luxury Fifth Avenue co-op building that's controlled by, X amount of people that are on the board, and they want to basically have a say in terms of who's going to live in the building. Now, in many cases, it's related to finances, right? They want to make sure the person can afford the building, can afford the maintenance, the upkeep, and isn't going to be an issue in the building financially. But where it gets gray is it opens up the door for potential discrimination. Now, thankfully, look, New York, just like California, we are the melting pot, all different
Right.
types from all over the world. But there are instances where you scratch your head and you wonder, was this person denied for the wrong reason? The problem is it's really, really hard to prove. But there have been a lot of efforts over the years to challenge this process, to effectively make co-ops disclose why they're turning somebody down, but they haven't been successful yet. But I'll tell you, we closed I think we're on pace to close over 1,000 residential transactions here in New York City this year.
That's
So
incredible.
when I'm thinking of the ones where maybe there was potential discrimination, maybe we're looking at one or two. It's not something that is rampant that we're all that concerned about or seeing on a regular basis. But to answer your question now, once the board approves it, then we proceed to the closing. So at that point, the parties actually get in a room and they sit at a conference table, and money is exchanged, either bank check or maybe a wire, in exchange for the deed if it's a condo or a townhouse, or a stock certificate, believe it or not, and a proprietary lease if it's a co-op. And once that's done, the deal's closed, documents get recorded with the city, and we're in business.
Wow, that's crazy. That's so different. And so our market tends right now it's a little slow, but it if there was that much lag time in the beginning, going back to the beginning when buyer and seller are interested, and then you start doing the due diligence for the buyer, which is incredible the amount of due diligence, which is amazing the amount of due diligence you do. I mean, that takes a lot of energy and time and just time. But then it sounds like if another buyer wanted to come in, since you're not in contract, another buyer can come in and offer a higher price. And then the other people are out, right? And out of, I assume, your fee.
Well, not necessarily. So because any buyer that's coming in, if they're engaging experienced local counsel here in New York, they're going to have to go through the same due diligence. That
Okay.
home that I talk about is work that any buyer's attorney should do for any buyer. But here's the best part: we have to be fast. So
Yeah.
all that work I was describing, it sounds like it would take weeks to complete, right? No, we're turning this around in a week if we can, all of it. And the issue that we have is most buildings in New York City are managed by property managers. So a lot of
Okay.
our questions are questions that we have to ask the managers. The only delay we have is it takes them time to answer these questions. So most property managers here in New York are telling us now, because they're so busy, that it's going
Right.
to take them 5 to 7 days to answer our questions.
Wow.
So
It takes some time. And then how long is a contract period?
It really depends on most deals in New York have an on or about closing date, which might sound a little foreign, but basically the idea is we're going to pick a date and then we'll give both sides a 30-day window to close within that date. So if it's on or about December 1st, you're really aiming to close by the end of the year. And within that period, a lot has to happen. If it's a cash deal, okay, that's going to close quicker. So a typical cash deal from contract to closing will take about 45 to 60 days. But a deal involving financing could take 60 to 90.
Oh, wow. Financing takes long there. Why is it
It,
so much longer? Here we can do it in 21 days usually.
it can. It depends on the bank.
Okay.
Some banks are really fast and they can get the paperwork done pretty quickly. But on average, you're looking at about 60 days, but some banks take a little longer. But the
Okay.
the other piece to the puzzle is the board has to approve the loan too.
Oh, that was the question. My next question was two-part. One is, how long does it take to get an appointment, and at what point does the board interview? And are they interviewing the candidate, and is someone with the buyer? And how does that look? And then how long does it take for the lender to approve
Yeah.
them?
It's a really interesting process. I'm actually going through this right now where we're buying a family investment apartment, a co-op here in Manhattan. And we submitted our board application. Now, believe it or not, you have to give bank statements, credit searches. You have to prove your assets and liabilities, all of this. And so you put all this package together. You could block out account numbers and socials, and then you're
Right.
submitting this to folks that are on the board who review it. And if they're okay with your finances, if they see you as a good candidate, then it moves on to the next step. And they decide whether or not they want to call you in for an interview. Now, those interviews are actually, they could be on Zoom or they could actually be in person. It depends on the building. Some buildings are stricter than others. And what that really is, it's a get to know you session. They want to get a feel for who you are, who's moving into the building. And that's really related just to co-ops. That doesn't happen in condominiums. That's for co-ops where they want to actually see who's living in the building, get a feel for you, and then
Right.
make a decision, believe it or not, if they feel you're a good fit for the building.
It's crazy. It's like an interview for a country club or a job.
In a way, it's loosened up a lot. You have your luxury co-ops where you have to be worth $10 million just to get in the door. I mean, you have those, and they'll be very restrictive. Some don't even allow financing at all, no mortgages. You have to buy cash. But your average co-op, relatively easy process. Where as long as you pass muster financially, and as long as you don't say anything crazy during the board interview, you'll get approved.
So what I noticed, because I'm obsessed with looking at places in New York, everywhere we travel, I always am, I'm on the website, the real estate website. So I noticed that co-ops they're less costly than condos. Condos
Mhm.
seem to be higher priced. And what's the reasoning behind that?
Well, you definitely have a different valuation between co-ops and condos. They're taxed differently, they're valued differently, and one of the main reasons is condominiums are they're real estate. You're actually getting a deed for the property, your own section, block, and lot. You own that piece of real estate. You also don't have to worry about necessarily the board approval and that sort of thing. Although there is an approval process on the condominium side, it's definitely more streamlined. But from a valuation standpoint, that's one of the key reasons. And on the co-op side, you'll typically see properties that are a little less expensive, but it's a question of what your carrying costs are. And this is where buyers have to be very careful, because you could see a co-op that might be at a lower price, but the maintenance, the carrying charges could be higher than it would be in a condominium. So you have to really balance it out to see what's the better investment for you. If you're an investor, somebody who wants to buy a condo and rent it out, or buy an apartment and rent it out, condo's the way to go. Co-ops are not made for investment. And that's the other valuation answer. You're limited in terms of what you can do with the property. Typically
Okay.
speaking, co-ops are meant for primary residences. Condos can be for owners, investors, folks coming from overseas, and that explains the valuation difference.
Yeah, no, that makes perfect sense. And I was looking at when I was looking, I'd like to buy a place for my daughter. She lives in New York. So I was like fell in love with I was over in Brooklyn Heights and it was so cute. A
Okay.
friend was taking me around. It was so nice. And I'm like, this is a nice clean area for you, Bianca. She's living on the Lower East Side now. And I'm like, let's move you over now to Brooklyn Heights. It's so cute and safe. It looks, I mean, I don't know, safe, but it beautiful, tree-lined streets and decorated beautifully for Halloween. But I noticed that there were the different HOA dues and taxes. So, when someone buys a co-op, do they know is there some kind of a cap on they might have an assessment? Could the assessment just be a crazy amount? Do you know that? Is that part of your research? Like, are you going to do an assessment in the next 6 months or year or 2 years?
Great question. And this is really where we as attorneys earn our keep. And not so much on the contract negotiation side of things. It's really on the work that we do before the deal gets signed, believe it or not, because we need to really dig into that building and find out, are they repairing the roof? Do they have a boiler renovation? Any major repairs? Now, California is the same way. You repair anything in New York City, it's really, really expensive. I just looked at a building recently for a client, and it cost them $500,000 to replace the roof. So these are real numbers. And then you have to look at the size of the building. How many units are in the building, right? So if there's 100 units in the building, okay, then that cost will get split 100 ways. But if there's only 10, that split is a lot lower, 10 ways. So it's a bigger number for the buyer. And we find that out before they sign the deal. We'll ask the property manager any planned major capital improvements, any threatened litigation, anything that can cost our client money down the road. We have to find out before they sign.
Wow. Well, you are invaluable to these transactions. This is incredible. So,
Oh, thank you.
when anyone thinks of hiring an attorney, I'm sure they see dollar signs. Oh my God, it's going to be so expensive. It's an attorney. Attorneys cost thousands and thousands of dollars. So, what is a fee for someone to hire an attorney to do this?
Yeah, it's a great question, and the answer really is it depends. It depends on the size, scope of the deal. Yeah, we work on a flat fee basis where if you're looking at an average, a one bedroom apartment here in Manhattan, we're probably charging somewhere in the area of $4,500 as a flat fee, which covers
Okay.
all the due diligence work, contract negotiation, all the way through closing. But if we're working on a deal and we have at 80, 90, $100 million, the liability to the firm is a lot higher. So even though the amount of work for the larger size deal is effectively the same, the liability is greater. So that's why there's a bit of a sliding scale on the fee. So you
Oh,
could have fees going up 10, 20, 30, 40, $50,000. But that's always a negotiation that happens at the beginning. But I'll
right.
tell you one thing, you do end up getting what you pay for. And I was at a real estate conference a couple of days ago, and we were talking about this. And I always believe in being honest. I manage a firm of 50 people, and somebody asked me, if I hire you, am I going to get you? And a lot of people will answer that question and say, oh, please, no, no worries, you're going to get me. I take the other approach, and I said, I'm going to be honest with you. I will be behind the scenes, I will oversee everything, but I'm going to put you in touch with not one, but two colleagues who are going to run point on this deal. I'll oversee it, but they're going to be running the day to day on it. And in my opinion, that's a much better way of operating. But you have lawyers out there that will charge less. I mean, I've seen everything from lawyers running sales, discounted fee promos. But if you're a buyer out there looking for a piece of property, especially in New York, you want to make sure you're working with somebody who's actually done these deals before, closed deals in that building before, and actually has that experience and broker relations to get the deal closed.
Well, that's a great answer because I was going to ask what differentiates you. So, yeah, I'd rather pay the higher fee now than get stuck down the
I'll tell
road.
you, one,
Well,
the
that's
we get
terrible.
called, right, and the first question, if a prospective client calls me up and says, how much do you charge, is the first question. I generally don't get that client because we will never be the cheapest, but
Right.
we do strive to be the best.
I love it. Well, thank you. We've got to take a quick commercial break. We'll be right back with Michael Romer in New York City.
Did you know that your beliefs create your entire reality, but it's the subconscious beliefs that do most of the creating? Belief shifter and life coach Shiraz can help you identify those limiting beliefs and eliminate them, often in a single session.
Like it was almost instant, like I had relief right away.
Creating better health, relationships, careers, and finances. Let Shiraz help you step out of safety and into awareness.
Definitely something's happening. It's like a flow inside. It feels good.
Whether in person or online, Shiraz provides personal coaching, belief shifting. Visit Shiraz at energeticmagic.com or call 416-529-7429. Energetic Magic. Find your greater happiness. Be well. Be aware. Be magical. Mike Zorek, a three-time California state champion in Greco-Roman wrestling at 114 pounds. Mike, blind since birth, was born in Hartford, Connecticut. He was a six-time national placer, including 2 seconds, 2/3, and 2/4. He also won the Veterans Folk-Style Wrestling twice at 152 pounds. In all these tournaments, he was the only blind competitor. Nancy Zorek, a creative spirit whose talents have taken her to the stage and into galleries and exhibitions in several states. Her father, a commercial artist who shared his instruments with his daughter and helped her fine-tune her natural abilities, influenced her decision to follow in his footsteps. Ms. Zorek has enjoyed a fruitful career doing what she loves. Listen Saturday mornings at 12 Eastern for the Nancy and Mike Show for heartwarming stories and interesting talk.
Welcome back to Mastering the Art of Success. I'm your host, Debbi DiMaggio. We are here today with Michael Romer. He is giving us the insights of all and everything legal in New York City. And now let's move over to the Hamptons, since you work there too. So give us an insight on what's different there. I assume there's many more homes, but they're also very expensive. So when you're doing your due diligence in the Hamptons, what's a little different from the city? And also, what kinds of issues come up when someone's buying a house in the Hamptons? I mean, it seems like it would be relatively simple, but are there any issues that could come up with a home there?
Oh, it's a whole different world. And now the buyers are oftentimes the same people, right? You have somebody who has the condo in New York and they're buying the home in the Hamptons. Now, the Hamptons is an area where we've worked in for a long time, but we had that reputation of being a New York City law firm handling deals in the Hamptons. And the Hamptons is a community where local attorneys are really recommended and local agents want to work with people who are there. So a few years ago, we actually hired the town attorney of East Hampton, and we actually brought him in to manage our Hamptons practice. So
Wow.
now we actually have an office in Southampton. We're set up and running. We're closing a ton of deals. And I'll tell you a story, and then I'll answer your question about due diligence. So we send out this newsletter, and we're huge proponents of networking, marketing, putting yourselves out there. And our newsletter goes out to our database, a lot of real estate agents. And then all of a sudden we get a phone call. I see that you close high deals, high profile deals with luxury properties for well-off clients. Can you help us with this property? Purchase price $88 million in the Hamptons. So we were hired on this deal, got the deal closed, but that deal came to us from our newsletter where we're sending it out. All of a sudden the phone rings. That doesn't happen every day, but I'll tell you, it really is a testament to just putting yourself out there. And that deal closed successfully. But these deals, you have a lot more local due diligence that you have to look into. You have to look at, obviously, CO restrictions, zoning issues. If it's on the waterfront, you have to look at anything related to that. You have to look at the risk of flood. So there's a lot of variations, even from town to town, whether it's East Hampton, Southampton, Bridgehampton. There's all different types of restrictions that you have to look at. So working with somebody based out there who can help us with these searches, do all that due diligence, and basically take our high level of Manhattan service and bring it out there in the same way. It's worked out really well for us, and we're excited about it out there.
Oh, absolutely. And you certainly have a good person to be on your team, someone who knows the Hamptons real estate and zoning intimately. That's incredible. What sorts of restrictions would there be on a property there?
Well, look, the key thing out there is you want to make sure that the certificate of occupancy for the property is matches the use of the home, right? So most of these properties are single family homes. You have others where you've got, these are commercial properties that we come across from time to time, but for the most part, these are single family properties. But now you're looking into use. Maybe there's guest houses. Some of these properties are compounds that have their own golf courses and tennis courses or tennis courts. We need to make sure that all of this is on the up and up and all of this has been approved. And so we basically send somebody to the town to really just check everything, because some of these properties are very massive and we need to make sure that the survey is proper, everything is built within the lot lines, we don't have any easement issues with neighbors. So there's a lot of issues very similar to the luxury areas of California that I'm sure you've come across. A similar idea, but some of the numbers out there, it's staggering. It's unbelievable what it costs to rent a house in the Hamptons for the summer.
It's crazy.
And an agent came up to me recently and they said they just got a lease signed and it's for the summer out east is what we call it here. And the lease of the house for the summer, I believe, was $350,000 for the house.
Now, in a lease agreement, do attorneys get involved in that, or just the agents, or does the attorney contract?
At that level, yes. At that level, typically the agents will call in lawyers to draft the leases because we're talking about numbers that are pretty high. But at the average lease, sometimes the agents will prepare the lease and shoot it out and negotiate it. But I always recommend, and not for selfish reasons, I always recommend that a lawyer looks at the lease just to make sure that there's no issues. Because in New York, very similar to California, one of the hardest things to do is to actually evict a tenant. And you need to make sure that your That was my first job, not to segue on you, but coming out of law school, I was a landlord tenant lawyer in New York City for about 9 months. And I loved the people I worked with, hated the job. It was my job to evict people that weren't paying their rent or weren't
Oh,
paying their, weren't taking care of the property. And I'll never forget, I went into court, my first case, and I'm thinking, here I am, I've made it. I want the truth. And I go in there with my briefcase and I'm ready to try a case. And the judge says to me, "Counselor, come to my chambers." And I'm thinking, oh no, what did I do? Did I offend him? Did I do something wrong? Am I wearing the wrong suit? So then he pulls me into his chambers and he said, "Counselor, you're going to give this tenant another 6 months." And I'm
oh,
arguing, pleading my case. I had exhibits, exhibit tabs, the whole thing. And he said to me, "Counselor, I that's all well and good, but you're going to give them another 6 months. If they don't pay in 6 months, come back and I'll evict them. And oh, by the way, welcome to New York City real estate." And I've never forgot that lesson.
oh my gosh, that's crazy. It's like we already have it. This is how it works, mister.
This the system does, and look, and for good reason too. The tenants, do believe they're entitled to those protections. But
Right.
New York and California are very tenant friendly jurisdictions.
Oh yeah. Oh,
Sometimes too
definitely.
friendly, and then it delves into politics. We don't necessarily need to go there, but it we have an affordability problem here in New York.
Yeah. Oh, actually, all right. Well, let's go to that question then. Oh, I had a question on that. I had another one I was shooting at, but let's talk about affordability. Where's my question? So how do you deal with that in New York? How do you deal with the affordability issue there?
Well, we have affordability issues on the purchase side as well as the rental side. So you look at your average one bedroom here in Manhattan to rent an apartment, you're looking at about $5,000 a month just to rent an apartment here in the city. To buy a one bedroom condo, on average, it's about $1 million. And the average person really can't afford that. The sad part of this is that young people these days, they feel that renting is the only option, and they come in realizing, okay, my only option is to rent, and then they just plan on renting for as long as possible. And what I want to bring back is that dream of home ownership, that
Mhm.
it is possible if you save up for it, if you work for it. There was a young law student here I was talking to the other day. She's 24 years old, and we were talking about this, and I said, it's okay that you can't afford it now, but you could afford it maybe 5 years from now, but you have to plan for it. You have to work hard. You have to save money. And I feel like too many people want what they want and want it now, but
Right.
you have to earn it. But here in New York, it's really, really hard. So what's happening here? You've got all types of rent regulations. It's a highly regulated state here in New York. California, the same. We have rent control. We have rent stabilization. I'm sure you've seen in the news the upcoming election here in New York City, for mayor, a lot of talk about rent freezes, what that's going to mean. And the the buyer who's coming in, who's educated, is tuning out the noise, realizing New York City is always a good investment.
Right.
We've lived through everything you could possibly imagine in the 25 years that I've been doing this. But what's happening here in New York is a big disconnect between politics and landlords, property owners, where the politicians aren't paying enough attention to the landlord's need to actually make money. So if I'm a landlord and I want to, let's say I want to put up a new building or buy a building, I need to make sure that I'm going to turn a profit on it. Because if I'm
Right.
not, why am I doing it? I'll go do it somewhere else. So it's hard. And then you look at other markets in the country that aren't regulated, Nashville, Austin, places across the country like that, where you don't have these regulations. Sadly, that's where you're seeing more of the development. So what we really need is that private public partnership where governments at the city level, at the state level, are working with developers and owners to come up with realistic policies that don't scare developers away.
That's out. I was in LA a couple weeks ago and listening to an independent who will be running for mayor, and he was talking about how California, we have so many regulations. Yes, we want to still have, beautiful buildings and beautiful spaces, but he had a great description of just how many hurdles they have to go through in New York and California, and people are leaving, developers aren't building here because of that. And they
You
do
have
to
to
make.
incentivize developers to develop. You have to incentivize builders to build. Otherwise, they're not going to do it. But sometimes that's not the way the political winds are blowing, and because nobody ever feels bad for the developer, nobody ever feels bad for the landlord, but they they do need to actually make money and turn a profit. Otherwise, they'll just do it somewhere else. So we need
Right.
more affordable housing, but we need more reasonable, practical solutions.
Well,
And I
you wrote an article that you just published in U.S. News, policies to make
did.
ship more attainable. So let's break that down.
Oh my goodness. The I put a lot of thought into that article. How can we help restore this dream of home ownership? Because it's a little sad that people feel like they could never afford a home. I bought my first home with my wife. I think I was 28 years old. I barely had any money, and things were a little different there. It was a lot easier to get a mortgage. 2008 happened, and banks obviously had to smarten up for good reason. But the opportunity is really there, but we have to come up with some creative policies to ease the restrictions. I do believe that efforts need to be made to preserve single family housing in the suburbs, those residential neighborhoods. I mean, I grew up in a single family housing neighborhood in Staten Island, houses, and you're riding bikes and walking to your neighbor's house. And to me, that was very American. Now,
Yes.
did I feel like I was part of New York City? Not really, because Manhattan is a different world, right? So there's the best of both worlds, but I think we need to preserve that more, because that's where typically people will raise their kids. They'll buy a home in the suburbs and raise their kids. And there's a big push to take this affordable housing need, so that the shortage in the cities, what they're looking to do is create policies to push that housing out into the suburbs, which then has the impact of really doing away with the single family neighborhoods. So preserving single family housing is one idea I had. The other one was creating 401k style accounts for homeowners, where you basically come up with a way where people, let's say they're 23, they get their first job. Maybe they start saving for their first home before they save for their retirement, and give them a tax benefit so that they can actually put that money aside, earn money on it, and then be able to take that money out tax free and put it towards their primary residence. Eliminating capital gains on primary residences completely throughout the country. Because you've got people sitting on property that they want to sell, but they don't want to pay the taxes on it. And if you could have, let's say it's an elderly couple, they've owned the property for 40 years, you can imagine what their capital gains could be, right? Especially these days. If you eliminated that, it puts more housing stock in the market and results in more deals. So these are the types of creative thoughts that I think we need to pay attention to.
Absolutely. Yeah, we have it because interest rates were so low at one time. We have limited inventory because why would people move? They might want to move, but it doesn't make sense if they have this 2 or 3%, then they're going to go buy a different house and it's going to double. It just doesn't make sense at all. So I know we definitely need to get it moving because real estate, as you know, it employs so many people, from contractors to Home Depot to everything, lawyers, everyone is so involved. So tell us, what are the biggest legal challenges currently facing developers and investors in New York's post-pandemic market?
It's the regulations related to rent, right? You're limited in terms of how much you can increase rent, especially in the rent stabilized world. It's really difficult to increase rent. And if you're a rent stabilized landlord, you're limited by what the city tells you could increase your rent on an annual or biannual basis. And it makes it really difficult because what it ultimately does is, if you think about it, and this is where it gets a little crazy to me, right? New York City, I would say almost half of the revenue that comes into the city government comes from real estate. Now you're talking about all these different types of taxes. But then if you go ahead and you put in policies that devalue the real estate, now you're collecting less taxes on these properties. So then how are you going to go and afford all of these programs that you want to roll out when the money's not coming in? And that's where it's just not practical. I loved how you said you were talking to somebody who was an independent, recently, and they had some ideas. we need more independence in this country. There's
Right.
too much of a split where it's either you're over here or you're over here. We need more rational, meet in the middle type of policies, and that will encourage more people to buy, develop. But here in New York City, yeah, we're really hamstrung a bit in terms of what can be done with respect to rent stabilization laws. And the interesting thing here is now we have this mayoral election, and Governor Cuomo, the former governor of New York, is actually running for mayor of New York. So now we're in a situation where the person who signed the rent stabilization laws that we're struggling with is now running to really save the city here in New York. And it's a bit ironic where you're looking at this, scratching your head saying, wait a minute, isn't he the same person that signed these laws that we're dealing with? So it's a struggle, but I tell you, politics here in New York is it's very sensitive. And to me, it doesn't matter which side of the aisle you're on. I just try to encourage people to just find common ground, because that's really where good policy is.
Absolutely. No, it's tough. Yes, we need that real estate to just start moving around. So real quick on rent stabilization. So rent could be $800 for someone's lifetime. Like, explain how,
So
explain.
two different types. I know that sounds it does sound crazy, right? So you've got rent control, and rent control. This has been going on forever, where it's really limited, and basically that's where you're seeing situations where you could have $800 a month or 1,000, and it is in a sense for life, right? And then there's efforts where you can preserve it if you keep it within the family, and then there's rent stabilization, where it's government regulated in terms of how much you can increase rent on an annual basis. And here in New York City, there's actually a board. They meet and they decide on how much the increase can be. I will tell you, we had former Mayor de Blasio, and we had two different periods of time where rent was frozen. And it wasn't good for real estate. It wasn't good for valuation. So a lot of these rent freeze ideas that are being thrown around in the media, it's not original. These are ideas that have been tested and have failed. And I really hope reasonable minds prevail.
Yeah, that's tough. So, Michael, tell us what you would share with your 20 or 25-year-old self looking back.
Oh, it's a great question. From my standpoint, the way I can best look back, I would tell myself, just be kind, be humble, and work hard. And that those were lessons that my father taught me, and I hope those are lessons that my son will learn from me. Doesn't matter how big you are, doesn't matter what position you have, doesn't matter how much money you have. Be kind and open-minded and treat everybody with respect, but don't ever expect anyone to give anything to you. Just
I
go
love
get
it.
it. Just go get
I
it. Because too many people come in today and they want this, they want that, and they want their cake and they eat it too. But they have to work hard for it, and that's the mentality we need to get back to. If you're kind to people, you work hard, you do the right thing, you pay it forward, it works out.
Oh my God, I'm so in alignment with that. I always say lead with kindness and it'll all come back. But it's hard. You also have to work hard and be kind to people, because it does come back when you work hard. But yes, you can't just accept to get something for nothing. But I loved this interview. I actually told my husband this morning, I go, this is not usual. I don't usually speak to attorneys. It's not where I usually find myself. And it was so fascinating. I just had such a great time. And thank you so much, Michael. It was
It was my
wonderful.
sincere pleasure. Thank you for having me.
How do people get a hold of you?
Okay, well, you can check me out at romerdebbas.com. That's ROMERDEBBAS.com, or email me at mromer@romerdebbas.com. Also, we've got an online real estate education platform for any broker that wants to learn more about the real estate business. You can check that out at recenterforsuccess.com.
Oh, I will share that with all of my agents at Corcoran, and
Please
we will
do.
have it in the show notes. Thank you so much. It was my pleasure.
Thank you so much. I appreciate you.
Tune in each week for another episode of Mastering the Art of Success with host Debbi DiMaggio. Thursdays, 2 p.m. Eastern. Real stories, real strategies, real success.